Being royal comes with its privileges, castles, titles, and crowns. But perhaps nothing symbolizes royal power and love more than a ring. For Queen Camilla, once seen smiling with a dazzling diamond on her hand, that ring meant more than status. It marked her place beside King Charles. But today, that very symbol has vanished, and so, it seems, has her place in the palace. Reports swirling out of Buckingham Palace are painting a shocking new picture. King Charles, furious and visibly shaken, has allegedly asked Camilla to leave. Even more stunning, he's demanded she return the very wedding ring that once sealed their bond in front of the world. What happened? For years, their relationship has been the subject of fascination and controversy. From scandalous beginnings during Charles's marriage to Princess Diana, to finally being accepted as a royal couple, they weathered storms that would sink most marriages. And through it all, Camilla stood beside Charles, often smiling quietly, working behind the scenes. But something's shifted, and it didn't happen slowly. Sources close to the palace describe a growing tension, one that's been bubbling under the surface for months, maybe even years. And now, that tension has boiled over into what many are calling the most dramatic royal fallout since Prince Harry stepped down. The return of the ring isn't just a symbolic gesture, it's a royal red flag. Insiders suggest this wasn't a moment of temporary anger, but a decision rooted in deeper conflict, a series of private disagreements that have finally reached the public stage. As the diamond was slipped off and Camilla was reportedly escorted out, one thing became clear. Something fundamental in the royal power dynamic has cracked. This isn't just about a ring, it's about trust, it's about control, and it may be the beginning of the end for one of the monarchy's most controversial relationships. For years, King Charles and Camilla presented a united front to the world, poised, composed, and always in step at royal events. Their relationship, though born out of controversy, had seemed to find its rhythm. They smiled at parades, stood shoulder to shoulder at state dinners, and gave the appearance of quiet strength. It looked like they had finally weathered the worst. But behind the grand facades of Windsor and Buckingham Palace, insiders whispered that all was not well. The couple's chemistry, once resilient through scandal and public disapproval, was wearing thin. Arguments that had once been private and hushed were becoming more frequent. At first, they were over small things: event details, staff decisions, press management. But over time, those small cracks deepened. Charles, raised in the shadow of Queen Elizabeth's reign, holds a firm belief in duty and royal tradition. He was molded by the weight of the crown long before it ever touched his head. Camilla, on the other hand, has always been more relaxed, more instinctive. A woman not born into the system, but brought into it by love. That contrast, once a balancing act, began turning into friction. Sources suggest that Charles grew increasingly uncomfortable with Camilla's handling of palace affairs. She reportedly made independent choices without discussing them with the king. Decisions about staff, protocol, and family matters that Charles felt should be made jointly, or not at all. For a man who values structure and legacy, it felt like a slow erosion of control. Even their public appearances began to reveal strain. Watchful royal watchers noted how Charles would sometimes appear distracted or cold during joint events, while Camilla smiled on as if unaware. Subtle changes in body language told a different story. One of two people growing distant under the pressure of duty. Behind palace gates, their once stable dynamic was beginning to falter. And with William and Kate rising in popularity, constantly held up as the ideal royal couple, the quiet comparison only added to Charles's stress. The stage was being set for something big. The calm that once held the royal couple together was slipping, and all it needed was one spark to collapse. It started like any other evening inside the palace, quiet footsteps, hushed voices of staff, and golden light spilling across marble floors. But deep within those historic walls, something was brewing. Behind a set of closed double doors, King Charles and Queen Camilla were having an argument, one that would become a defining moment in their relationship. Insiders say it began with a disagreement. Nothing unusual at first. But this time, something snapped. Voices rose, the tone changed, and suddenly, it wasn't just a discussion, it was a confrontation. What had simmered for months erupted into a storm. Those close to the couple say it wasn't just about one incident. It was about many things. Camilla's growing assertiveness, Charles's frustration with being challenged, and the emotional weight he's been carrying since his coronation. Underneath the royal smiles and stiff waves, the king was exhausted. Physically, emotionally, politically. And Camilla, rather than offering relief, had become, in his eyes, another pressure point. The tipping point remains a closely guarded secret. Some speculate it had to do with Camilla interfering in royal planning without Charles' approval. Others hint at something more personal, a breach of trust involving family decisions. But whatever it was serious enough for Charles to take a step that stunned even his closest aides. He told her to leave. It wasn't a temporary break or a polite request to cool off. It was a direct order. Palace staff were told to quietly collect Camilla's things. No fuss, no drama, just swift action. The Queen Consort, once the woman who stood beside him through global scrutiny, was gone in a matter of hours. But what shocked even the most seasoned royal insiders was what came next. Charles asked for the ring back. The ring, the same one that symbolized defiance, loyalty, and love after decades of scandal. To demand it returned wasn't just symbolic. It was surgical, precise, final. In that moment, something ended. And not just a chapter, possibly an entire era in Charles's personal life. The explosion had happened. Quiet, clean, and absolutely devastating. When a senior royal vanishes from the public eye, people notice. And when that royal is Queen Camilla, one of the most talked about figures in the monarchy's modern history, it sends shockwaves. In the days following her dramatic exit from the palace, Camilla was nowhere to be seen. No official events, no press releases, not even a photo. Just silence. It didn't take long for whispers to begin. Royal watchers, journalists, and curious onlookers started connecting the dots. She was absent from appearances she had been scheduled to attend. Charles appeared alone at a garden ceremony, and his smile, when it came, felt rehearsed, hollow. The empty seat beside him spoke louder than words. Then came the confirmation no one expected. Camilla was no longer wearing her wedding ring. Paparazzi caught her briefly leaving a private countryside residence, looking composed but noticeably bare-handed. That missing ring told the whole story. For years, Camilla had fought for her place in the royal family. She had endured public backlash, uncomfortable comparisons to Princess Diana, and years of being the outsider. But through it all, she held on. She showed up. She adapted. The wedding ring on her finger became proof that she had, finally, earned her place. Now, it was gone. Inside palace walls, the energy had shifted. Staff avoided questions. Senior royals offered no comment. But behind the scenes, insiders revealed that the fallout was more than personal. It was strategic. With King Charles under pressure to modernize and streamline the monarchy, Camilla's sudden exit may not have been just about emotion. It could have been a calculated decision to protect the crown. That's the thing about royal life. Every personal move has political consequences. And while Camilla stayed out of the spotlight, public reaction was growing. Supporters mourned her absence. Critics saw it as long overdue. Social media lit up with opinions, theories, and speculation. Had she overstepped her role? Had Charles acted out of frustration? Was this a temporary rift or something permanent? Nobody knew for sure. But one thing was certain. The Queen Consort was missing, and Buckingham Palace would never look the same again. Buckingham Palace has always been a fortress of tradition, a place where whispers are carried behind closed doors and never spoken aloud. But after Camilla's disappearance from the royal stage, those whispers became louder, spreading through corridors, press offices, and drawing rooms with unsettling speed. The palace, always careful to maintain an image of unity and control, offered no official explanation. But insiders began to share details, small, measured leaks, carefully chosen words, and behind them all, a troubling pattern emerged. This wasn't just a lover's quarrel. It was a deep-rooted conflict built on years of unresolved tension. At the center of it all was power. Who had it? Who wanted more? And who overstepped? Camilla, once happy to support from the sidelines, had reportedly begun to assert herself more forcefully in royal matters. Staff changes, scheduling conflicts, press decisions. She'd become more involved, even in areas traditionally left to the king and his advisors. Some said she was simply trying to protect Charles, shield him from stress, lighten his load, but others saw it differently. They felt Camilla was trying to expand her influence, pushing boundaries that had long been respected, especially when it came to William and Kate. Sources close to the palace claimed that Camilla and the Prince and Princess of Wales had clashed over plans for the future of the monarchy. Camilla allegedly didn't like how much attention Kate received. There were whispers that she tried to limit Kate's visibility at certain events, or pushed back when discussions arose about Kate's increasing public role. Charles, already under strain from the pressures of kingship and public expectation, found himself caught in the middle. And for a man raised to protect the crown at all costs, the idea of internal division was intolerable. It was these quiet battles, fought not with screaming matches, but with icy silence and strategic choices, that ultimately broke the bond. The palace didn't need to confirm it. The message was clear to those paying attention. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was about loyalty, legacy, and the boundaries of power within the House of Windsor. And the whispers haven't stopped since. Inside the royal household, silence is often louder than words. And when Camilla was quietly removed from the palace, that silence stretched across the family like a heavy fog. No official statements, no press conferences, just subtle shifts in posture, presence, and appearance. But those who know the royals well could read between the lines, and what they saw spoke volumes. Prince William, always measured and composed, maintained his usual calm exterior. He didn't release any comment, didn't appear shaken in public. But according to palace sources, he supported the king's decision behind the scenes. It wasn't about revenge or personal triumph. It was about stability, for the monarchy, for the public, and for the future. William has always been quietly protective of his family, especially Kate. If Camilla's actions were causing internal friction, he likely saw this outcome as necessary, even if uncomfortable. Princess Kate, equally discreet, also stayed silent, but those who have followed her closely noted a change. Her body language at recent public engagements was more assured, more visible. Royal watchers said she looked unburdened, as if a tension had been lifted. Whether that's coincidence or a quiet reflection of changing dynamics, no one knows for sure. But it didn't go unnoticed. Prince Harry, now an ocean away in California, reportedly reacted with calm indifference. While surprised, he was not drawn back into the palace drama. Having long since distanced himself from royal protocol and expectations, Harry has made it clear he no longer plays by palace rules. His silence in this case was not from loyalty. It was from detachment. As for other senior royals, responses ranged from shock to quiet understanding. Some were reportedly blindsided, Others had seen it coming. Those closest to Queen Elizabeth's legacy, especially the older generation, were said to be deeply unsettled by the very public unraveling of a union once thought unbreakable. Still, the strongest reaction came from within the palace staff, people who had served both Charles and Camilla loyally for years. For them, the suddenness of it all was jarring. One longtime aide reportedly said, "It's like a chapter just ended without warning." And perhaps that's exactly what it was. Of all the symbols tied to love, none carries the weight of a wedding ring, especially when that ring belongs to royalty. Camilla's ring wasn't just a personal token. It was history, commitment, controversy, and triumph all wrapped around a single finger. A visible reminder of a love story that defied decades of public scrutiny. And now it was gone. When Camilla stepped out without her ring, it wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. There was no need for words, press releases, or formal announcements. The absence of that ring told the world more than any official report ever could. That particular ring had once belonged to King Charles's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. It was a piece of royal heritage, passed down and given new meaning when Charles slipped it onto Camilla's finger. For years, it represented a relationship that had withstood enormous pressure, from the fallout of Princess Diana's death to years of public disapproval. Against all odds, that ring had seemed like the final chapter of a long, winding love story. But its return changed the entire narrative. Sources say Charles didn't ask for the ring out of anger. It was deliberate, calm, final, like closing a door gently, but with no intention of reopening it. By requesting the ring back, Charles wasn't just marking the end of a personal bond. He was signaling a shift in his role as king. The symbolism was undeniable. Duty over desire, monarchy over marriage. For Camilla, giving it up must have been its own kind of heartbreak. That ring had not just come to symbolize love, it had become her armor, her proof that she belonged. And in one swift moment, it was removed. The public noticed immediately. Social media lit up. Commentators analyzed old photos, showing the ring proudly displayed at state banquets and royal engagements. The contrast was stark. The ring was gone. The fairy tale had ended, or at least taken a sharp turn. In the end, it wasn't a scandal that spoke loudest. It was the silence of a bare finger. After decades of slowly carving a place for herself within the monarchy, Camilla now finds herself outside palace walls, her future uncertain, and her title hanging in the balance. One moment, she was the queen consort standing shoulder to shoulder with the king. The next, she was gone, quietly, without a trace of ceremony. Now, all eyes are on her next move. For now, Camilla has retreated from public view. Reports place her at one of the king's countryside residences, where she is said to be staying away from the spotlight, surrounded by a small group of trusted friends and staff. No public statements, no defiant appearances. Just silence. Whether that silence is tactical or emotional, no one knows. What happens next is unclear. Some royal observers believe Camilla may choose to live out the rest of her days in quiet dignity. After all, she never sought the spotlight in the way others have. Her relationship with Charles was private, deeply personal. Maybe, they say, she'll find peace in returning to a simpler life. Country gardens, books, and dogs, far away from the scrutiny of flashbulbs and headlines. Others aren't so sure. There are whispers, always whispers, that Camilla may not stay quiet for long. That after years of being labeled the other woman, she may now want to reclaim her story. A book? A carefully chosen interview? A documentary-style reveal? The possibilities are real, and for someone who's been painted by others for most of her life, it would be a chance to finally speak in her own voice. Then there's the matter of her title. Will she retain the name of Queen Consort in any capacity? Or will she be quietly rebranded as the Duchess of Cornwall again? That question remains unanswered. So far, the palace has offered no clarification, and the ambiguity only fuels the speculation. Whatever comes next, it's certain Camilla's story is far from over. She may be out of the palace, but she's still very much a part of the royal equation, whether as a former queen, a private citizen, or a woman who still has more to say. Because if we've learned anything from royal history, it's this: silence doesn't always mean surrender. For most of his life, King Charles waited in the shadow of a legacy. His mother's reign, the people's love for Diana, and the weight of public expectation. Now, with the crown finally on his head, he finds himself standing alone. No longer the prince waiting in the wings, but a monarch carrying 1,000 years of tradition. And recently, the emotional fallout of a deeply personal split. Without Camilla by his side, Charles must now navigate the role of king without his longtime confidant. For decades, Camilla was his sounding board, the person who knew him best, often helping him through the storms of public backlash and private frustration. But now, as he walks into rooms solo and takes on royal engagements without her presence, there's a quiet that follows him, one that's less about protocol and more about absence. Those close to the palace say Charles has thrown himself into his work. Meetings, ceremonies, speeches, he's focusing on legacy, on making his short reign impactful. With Queen Elizabeth's long, steady leadership still fresh in people's minds, Charles feels the pressure to prove himself. And fast. Every move is calculated, every word rehearsed, every gesture watched. But there's no denying the emotional toll. Insiders suggest that Charles has been more reserved in recent weeks, less jovial, more distant. His once easy smile now appears strained. There's a sense that the weight of the crown, once purely symbolic, has become heavier without the emotional support he once relied on. And then there's the public. While Charles has made efforts to modernize the monarchy, the public's affection has always leaned more toward William and Kate. In recent months, that contrast has become starker. The younger royals are seen as the future, fresh, relatable, and stable. Charles, meanwhile, is viewed as transitional, a bridge between what was and what will be. Now, with Camilla out of the picture, that bridge feels lonelier than ever. He wears the crown, yes, but it's the silence around him that speaks loudest. The cost of leadership, the price of legacy, and the loneliness of being king. As news of Camilla's quiet exit swept across headlines, the world was left with one big question: how would the public react? The British monarchy, long powered by tradition and image, relies heavily on the approval, or at least acceptance, of the people. And with the palace silent and Camilla vanishing from view, public opinion quickly filled the vacuum. And it was divided. Some were sympathetic. They remembered the Camilla who stood by Charles during his most difficult moments, during public backlash, through royal transitions, and during Queen Elizabeth's passing. These voices called the breakup cold, sudden, and even unfair. Social media lit up with posts defending her years of service, reminding others that Camilla was never in it for the spotlight, but rather for love. But those voices weren't the majority. A larger chorus, particularly among younger generations, saw this moment differently. To them, this wasn't a tragedy. It was a correction, a long overdue shift in royal energy. Some even called it justice for Diana, suggesting that the past had finally caught up with the present. Memes, TikToks, and online threads picked apart the symbolism of Camilla returning the ring and being asked to leave. For many, it wasn't cruel. It was karmic. In the press, coverage leaned neutral. Mainstream outlets tread carefully, reporting facts without speculation. But tabloids, always hungry for drama, took a sharper tone. Headlines asked whether Camilla's ambition had finally gone too far, or if her time in the palace had been destined to end this way from the start. In contrast, public support for Kate Middleton appeared to rise even further. With Camilla gone, many pointed to the Princess of Wales as the steady hand the monarchy needs. The comparison was hard to avoid. Two women, both outsiders once, but only one still standing. In the end, the public's reaction wasn't just about Camilla. It reflected deeper attitudes toward the monarchy itself. Who belongs, who leads, and what kind of royals people want for the future. Because when a queen steps down, even quietly, the world doesn't just watch. It judges. With Camilla gone, and Charles under growing pressure, the focus has shifted naturally, and perhaps inevitably, to Prince William and Princess Kate. For years, the public has viewed them as the modern face of the monarchy. Youthful yet composed, traditional but accessible. And now, in the wake of the recent palace turmoil, their role has never been more critical. The crown may rest on King Charles's head, but the future? That clearly belongs to William and Kate. Even before the current royal shakeup, the couple had been gradually stepping into more visible leadership roles. From international trips to high-profile charity work, their schedule has grown steadily heavier. And since Charles's recent health concerns and Camilla's departure, their presence at royal events has taken on a more symbolic weight, as if they are not just representing the monarchy, but already preparing to lead it. Sources inside the palace say Charles has begun involving William in more private briefings and strategic decisions. While this isn't a formal transition of power, it reflects growing trust and urgency. With public confidence in the monarchy shaken, Charles is betting on William's steady demeanor and Kate's popularity to stabilize the royal image. Kate, in particular, is at the heart of this royal evolution. With Camilla no longer in the spotlight, she is now undeniably the most senior royal woman. Her grace, diplomacy, and emotional intelligence have made her a unifying figure, someone who can carry both tradition and progress with ease. But this new chapter won't be without challenges. The couple must walk a delicate line, supporting the current king while quietly preparing for their own reign. Every word they speak, every cause they champion, every appearance they make will be analyzed for signs of transition. And with Kate's recent health struggles still in the public mind, the pressure on her is enormous. Still, if the past decade has shown us anything, it's that William and Kate are ready. They've been shaped by duty, steadied by love, and hardened by scrutiny. Now, they're stepping into the spotlight not just as heirs, but as the embodiment of the monarchy's future. The British royal family has always had a complicated relationship with the press, but the moment Camilla was reportedly asked to leave Buckingham Palace, the global media went into overdrive. What began as whispers in palace corridors quickly erupted into an international news cycle, spinning faster than a royal carriage wheel. Across the UK, newspapers splashed bold headlines about the Queen who wasn't, Camilla's quiet exit, and Charles draws the line. Even more reserved outlets like the BBC and The Times couldn't ignore the buzz. And while Buckingham Palace remained tight-lipped, speculation filled the silence. Internationally, the response was just as intense. In the United States, talk shows debated the breakup on live TV. Australian media, long fascinated by the royal family, dedicated primetime slots to royal analysts dissecting every move. Even European tabloids and broadsheets, usually focused on their own monarchies, ran front-page stories featuring somber photos of Camilla and sharp commentary on Charles's supposed new direction. Social media made things even louder. TikTok creators pieced together timelines, facial expressions, and old video clips trying to spot where it all went wrong. Twitter/X became a battleground of hashtags. #Camilla gone, #Charles solo, #Kate rising. Memes, opinion threads, and royal tea videos trended for days. And it wasn't just gossip. Historians and royal watchers stepped forward, noting that this was one of the most abrupt and visually dramatic royal shakeups since the days of Edward VIII. Some called it a necessary reset. Others saw it as a sign of deeper instability. Within the frenzy, two clear narratives formed. One painted Charles as a decisive king, restoring dignity to the crown, while the other framed him as cold and reactive, discarding the woman who stood by him when few others would. In truth, the media didn't just report the story. It shaped it. And as the cameras continued to click and the headlines stacked higher, one thing became clear. This was more than just a royal disagreement. It had become a public spectacle, a cultural moment, and a worldwide fascination with a monarchy that still manages, even after centuries, to surprise us all. Now that the dust is settling, one question remains at the center of every royal conversation. Where does the monarchy go from here? King Charles faces an incredibly delicate moment in his reign. With Camilla removed from her role and the public's gaze heavier than ever, he must now balance leadership, legacy, and family. The symbolic removal of Camilla isn't just a personal decision. It signals a possible shift in the direction of the monarchy itself. Insiders suggest that Charles is taking time to reflect, seeking counsel not only from his trusted advisors, but more closely than ever from Prince William and Princess Kate. While there is no official word on a divorce or formal change in status, the absence of Camilla from royal functions speaks volumes. Some believe this moment may serve as a reset, a chance to streamline the monarchy into something more modern, less tangled in scandal, and more focused on service. That could mean fewer active royals, more transparency, and a greater emphasis on William and Kate's role as the public face of the crown. But for Charles personally, this is no small transition. Camilla has been at his side for decades, through public outrage, personal hardship, and eventually acceptance. If this separation is truly permanent, it marks the end of a partnership that was, at its heart, rooted in defiance and resilience. It would also leave Charles more isolated, especially as he continues to face his own health concerns and the ongoing strain of royal duties. As for Camilla, her next steps remain unclear. Will she retreat quietly into private life? Or will she, in time, tell her story? Her silence thus far has only fueled speculation. But whether she returns to the public eye or chooses solitude, her chapter in the royal story is far from forgotten. Ultimately, this moment is not just a rupture, it's a reckoning. The monarchy is at a crossroads between its storied past and an uncertain future. Whether it rebuilds or breaks depends on the choices made now, by Charles, by William, and perhaps by fate itself. The crown remains, but the people wearing it are changing, and the story is still being written.